All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second day of GCon 360. We had a great turnout yesterday. We had 5 sessions throughout the day. Thank you to the many of you that turned out yesterday. I'm hopeful that a lot of you are showing up here again today. We have a great presentation for you guys today from Stefan Donze of AODocs, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a bit. But there are a few things that I want to touch on before we get to his presentation on centralized enterprise content ownership in Google Apps. So before we do turn it over to Stefan, I just wanted to mention that if you do have any questions for me or Stefan, you can enter them in the Q&A app in the top right-hand corner of your screen. You should see a little grid of squares in the top right corner of the Hangout on Air window. If you click on that, you'll have the option to choose between the Showcase app and the Q&A app. So you can go into the Q&A app and ask questions. And in the Showcase app, you'll if you stick around until the end of the presentation, we'll provide a form there that you can fill out to enter in to win our amazing free giveaways like the Chromebook Pixel that we're giving out for this featured session. We're also giving out some of these, lovely GCon t-shirts, and then a couple of our GCon 360 swag boxes. So, like I said, stick around until the end of the presentation for those, and we'll have a very, very short form for you guys to fill out, and then you'll be eligible for those giveaways. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Stefan from AODocs. So Stefan, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. So thank you all for attending our session. Today we'll discuss a certain number of important aspects of Google Drive when used in the enterprise. So we're going to talk about a certain number of items. The main topic being the ownership of files in Google Drive. But we will also look at certain aspects of sharing and visibility. Sharing in the sense of who can see the files, who has access to the files, and visibility in the sense of how can you make your content easier to discover for your end users. And in the end of the presentation, we will also introduce our product, AODocs File Server, and show how it can help apply and automate the best practices that we will be discussing. So first topic is the ownership in Google Drive. Google Drive has a peer-to-peer structure, meaning that by default, all the files that you create are owned by the user who creates them. So that creates a matrix of ownership, each user having its own files and then sharing with each other. And the main issue with this matrix is that as soon as a user leaves the company, if the account is terminated, all the files owned by this account disappear, even if they were shared by other users. So at any point in time, at any moment, you can have a certain portion of your assets that just disappear, either because the owner has deleted it or because the account has been shut down. Of course, you can transfer these files to another person before you terminate the account, but it's most often a cumbersome procedure. So let's look more specifically at some aspects and maybe some oddities in the related to ownership and file deletions. I have two users here. One is Alice. So this is Alice Google Drive, and the other one is Bob. This is Bob's Google Drive. Bob has a file that he just created, and he is going to share this file with Alice. So just using the standard sharing dialog, send. And as soon as I'm doing that, Bob's file will appear. So Bob's file does not appear in Alice My Drive. It's not yet added to there. So, but Alice can see it either in her mail, she has received a notification, or she can see it in the shared with me section of Google Drive. This section of Google Drive contains all of the documents that are shared with Alice, either directly or through a Google group. So I see Bob's file here. I can move it to my drive, and now the file is accessible in this area. So you see the owner is Bob, but other than that, I can open the file, I can collaborate, I can do what I want. So what happens if Alice deletes the file? I'm going to my drive, I'm clicking here on remove. Since the file is owned by somebody else, Alice cannot really remove it in the sense of moving it to the trash. All she can do is to remove it from my drive, but the file is not deleted. It's still in shared with me. I can take it back and move it back to my drive if I want. I can still use the file, and Bob, in his drive, can still see the file. So that's fine, no risk. Only in Google Drive, only the owner of a document can really delete it. If I do the same operation with Bob being the owner of the file, delete, what happens to Alice is that the file is no longer available. If she tries, so after a few seconds, we should see the Google Drive message here. File is in the owner's trash. The file is not available to Alice anymore. You see that Bob did not get any warning when trying to delete the file. So that Bob has no way of knowing that he has actually removed something from other people. So only the owner of a document can really delete it, first thing. Second thing, shared folder have a different behavior. If we have this folder here, which is shared with Alice and Bob, if I go in this folder, I have another file owned by Bob, right? If I look at the same folder from Bob, I see the same thing, Alice, Bob's file. If Alice here removes the file owned by Bob, again, the file is not deleted, the document is still available, but what happens is that the file is removed from the folder. So from Bob's point of view, the file becomes invisible. It's not in my drive, it's not in the folder, it's not in shared with me. Even if the file is not really deleted, if Bob doesn't remember that it exists, the file has all but disappeared. The only way Bob can go back to this sort of invisible file is to search it by keyword, and here I find it. So it's still here. And if Bob wants to restore it, he has to put it back in the folder. You see, when I move it to drive, I have this little mention, item is not in your drive. This message here means that the file is not contained in any folder visible to Bob. So the file is invisible. I put it in Alice in the original folder here, and here we go. I have restored things. So even if Alice is not able to really delete the file because she doesn't own it, she is able to remove it from the folder and make it as good as deleted. So what do we learn here? Our general recommendation, if you want to avoid that kind of issues, first is to make sure you control the ownership of the document. If you transfer the ownership of the files to a corporate account, meaning not a human user, then you protect those files from most scenarios of accidental deletion. The end user will not be able to move it in the trash and empty their trash, and user accounts that are shut down will not result in loss of data. The ownership, the transfer of ownership should happen as soon as the file is created or as early as possible in the lifetime of the file. Do not wait until the last minute, because when you shut down an account and you have to decide to move a file in bulk to another account, then all you do is you create more, you add more mess, more entropy to the recipient. If you give all the files to the manager or to a colleague, all you get is a big folder containing tons of stuff that you don't really know what to do with. So the files, for the same reason that the file is organized in a folder as soon as it's created, you want to transfer the ownership as early as possible. And the last thing about the folders, and we will come back to that again later, is the fact that you should, as much as possible, share entire folder structures as opposed to sharing individual files that can be randomly located in the folder structure. So let's look again, dig deeper into these notions of visibility and file sharing. So here we're going to use Alice and Bob again. And this time Bob is going to create a new shared file. So Bob is working on a marketing plan. So he's doing his marketing plan document. Okay, marketing plan. And for a while, the file is private, so he's working on his plan. My plan for 2015 big. And he wants to share the document with the whole of the company. Now that the plan is approved, it's going to go here and make the document visible to anyone at AODocs can find and access. So those 4 options here of sharing are global sharing. You can share with all of the domain, or you can share with everybody on the internet. There are 2 sub options, anyone with link or public. The difference between the 2 is that if you select anyone with the link, you have to send the link to the person. If you send to anyone in AODocs or anyone on the web, technically they can discover the file by a search query. So I'm going to share with anyone at AODocs, and I'm going to tell Alice that I have published my marketing plan, and please let me know what you think. So Alice received the message here. Okay, Bob has done his marketing plan. It's visible to the whole of the company. So let's go to my drive. I should see it. No, I don't have it in my drive. Let's see, shared with me. I don't see it in shared with me either. So, okay, but Bob told me that it was visible to the whole of the company. So I should be able to find it, right? Actually, I can't find it. Okay, what's wrong here? So let's ask Bob. Hey, Bob, can't find it. So Bob does what most people do in Google Drive user is going to take the link here, copy and paste, and sending by chat because Alice is not able to find it. Thank you, Bob. So now I can click on it. Yes, indeed, I can see it. So I have the permission to see it, view only. I can see Bob's cursor, everything. I can review the document fine. So why was I not able to find it? Let's search again. Here. Oh, now it is here. So what happens? There are some visibility rules in Google Drive that are that govern the fact that a file can show up in search results or not, can show up in shared with me or not, and files that you have the right to access are not automatically visible everywhere. So this matrix gives you some of those rules. When a file, all the files that you have opened once or that are added to your My Drive folder structure can always be found. So there is no surprise here. But what happened here is that the marketing plan from Bob had never been opened by Alice, and it was not in one of our folders. So since the file was not shared with her directly, it was shared with anyone in the company, we were in this section here where the files are not automatically visible, and they don't even show up in the search results. So the only way that Alice had to find the document was actually to receive the link from Bob. That's what she did. She asked by chat and she received it by chat. So the consequence of that is all the documents that you publish in that way, either by sharing it with a large Google group or sharing it with anyone in the company, cannot be discovered by end user. If they don't know that the file exists, they will not be able to find it because they have, even by using specific keywords. So again, our recommendation here to work around those visibility issues is to make sure you share an entire folder structure rather than individual files. As long as the starting point of your folder structure is somewhere in the My Drive of your end users or can be accessed easily from a single starting point, then your end users will be able to explore the full folder structure and ultimately to find the documents. So this notion of single starting point, this notion of exploration is very important when you provide let's say, business templates or standard files or reference documents to your end users. So avoid sharing individual files one by one, always shared folders. Sending links by chat and email, of course, is a fallback, but it's usually a symptom that something is wrong in your sharing methodology. And the last, again, the points of attention. Remember that files that have not been opened, in most cases, will not be findable by even by keyword search. So that's a big limitation. All right. So that covers visibility, how to make sure a file is visible by your end users. Now let's look at the other side of permissions, how to avoid a file being shared to too many people. All right, so this time again, let's go back to Bob. And Bob is going to create a new document. Bob's file. And is going to share it with Alice again. Right. So here I'm sharing the document with Alice, and I say can edit. But in fact, you will see that this can edit mode is actually giving Alice not only the right to modify the document, but it's also giving her the right to share the document with other people. And this virality, so to speak, in the permission can be confusing to a user because you're not always aware that by sharing the file, you're letting her also share it with others. So Alice is opening the document. All right. And she wants to show it to other people. So she's going to say, okay, let's share it with my friend Kitty28 blah 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 at gmail.com. Check it out. So you see, I have no problem adding it. So I have a little warning here, but I don't care. And let me also send the same file to someone else. So I have this sharing notice. I'm going to forward it to my friend Lara at AODocs. And you see, Gmail, I'm sending the link to a Google Doc to another person. And Gmail detects that this document has not been shared with this other person. So I have this pop-up showing up and says, hey, the file isn't shared with the recipient. What do you want to do? Well, of course, I will share it with anyone with the link. That's the default option. Okay, no problem. I'm not really reading it. So share and send and go. So what happened here is Bob has shared with another person without being aware that he was also giving the right to share. And now Bob comes back to my drive, looks at his shared file, and discovers that the document here is now shared with anyone with the link and shared with this gmail.com address that he has never seen. So how can I prevent that? I own this document. I should be able to control the permissions. I don't want anybody to share it all the way. So of course I can remove that. So I can remove the gmail.com and I can remove the anyone, move it back to private. Okay, now I have fixed the issue, but I want to prevent that from happening again. Google Drive provides this setting here at the bottom of the dialog, and it's very small, so I don't know if you can read it in the screen sharing, but basically it says that editors of the file will be allowed to add people and change the permissions. This is the default setting. So as soon as I share in can edit mode, I also give them the permission to change the permissions. But I can lock down this setting if I click here and say only the owner can change the permissions. So if I do that on my file, Alice still has the permission to modify the document, but she no longer has the possibility to share it with other people. If I go back to Alice again, and this time I'm clicking here on the sharing dialog, you see it says, you can ask the owner to change the sharing settings. I cannot add other people. If I want to add my kitty, blah, 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 this is going to send a request to Bob, we've sent the request to the owner, and Bob has to approve it before the file is added. Bob shared file, request for access. So that's the email received by Bob. Alice is requesting access. If I click here, that will add the requested user. But Bob has to approve this modification. So it's a much better protection to make sure that the file does not go outside of the intended recipients. Same thing if Alice tries to send this document by email. So let's do it again. Forward to Lara. Here, send. See, this time I have a different message. This drive file isn't shared with the recipient. Send anyway. I cannot. Gmail is not able to make the file public like it did before, because again, this file cannot be shared by anyone else than Bob. So I can decide to send it, I can cancel, or I can ask Bob to share it with Lara, but I will not be able to tamper with the permissions, even indirectly via Gmail. So if you want to protect your information, the most important thing to keep in mind is to block this reshare possibility, especially on confidential files, especially if you're sharing with external users. If you're sharing a document with someone outside of the company, keep in mind that if you give them the can edit permission, this person outside of the company will be able to share it with whoever they want. If you share in can view, then they don't have the ability to do that. But if you want to share in edit mode with external users, always think about blocking the resharing. Generally speaking, try to minimize the number of manual operations. So if you share documents with groups instead of individuals, then you minimize the number of permissions, and you will be able to minimize the number of human errors as well. To keep things simple, same thing, always this idea of minimizing number of manual operation. Set permissions on folders rather than single files, meaning that if you have a whole folder containing 10 documents, you know that this group of files is visible to the same group of people. If you have the typical mistake that people can do is to have a folder full of confidential files, and then you have one of them who's shared with other people, and you don't see it because you assume that everything is shared in the same way. So keep things simple. If you put permissions at folder level instead of file level, it's much easier to manage. And last but not least, there are many ways to share a file. So it's not just in the sharing dialog that you add other people, but there are indirect ways to share a file. If you send something by Gmail, like we've shown in the demo, the file can become public because Gmail decides to make sure all the recipients have access to it. There are when you add a comment in a document and you mention someone in the comment, automatically the file will be shared with the person mentioned in the comment. So all of these things that are designed by Google Drive to facilitate the collaboration can also indirectly have an impact and result in oversharing documents to unintended recipients. So based on all of these recommendations, we have built our product AODocs file server to help end users and administrators automate those best practices. So what is AODocs? It's an application that sits on top of the Google Drive API, and that is managing your files in Google Drive in an automated manner. So we create managed folders that we call libraries, and in these managed folders, we automatically transfer the ownership to a single corporate account that you have assigned to AODocs. And this account is not a human person, it's a technical account for which only the super administrators of your domain can access. And this account takes the ownership of all the files to protect those documents against accidental loss. AODocs is also managing the sharing permissions. So for example, AODocs is able to automatically block the resharing of the documents. and avoid them like we've seen to be made public by Gmail and that kind of stuff. And then we provide additional features on top of that, like per folder search. You can search documents in a specific folder. You can push the managed folders to the My Drive of all users, so to make sure that they are visible and they have this single starting point for exploring all of their files. And we have also a specific integration with Microsoft Office. You can open Word files, Excel files directly in Office. So if I go back to my Google Drive, so I have this folder customers where you see the owner is the AODocs account. So in our domain, we have named the AODocs account AODocs owner, so that it provides a visual indication to end users about which files are owned by the system. If I go to this folder, you see that everything here is owned by AODocs. If I go to a specific subfolder, I can upload a file. Let's see, let's take an image or something. And as soon as I upload the file to the folder, the ownership of the new file will be given to the AODocs owner account instead of belonging to Alice. So as soon as this file is created in Drive, it will be managed by the system. Alice can quit and shut down her account. This file will remain. Then I have a certain number of permission setting. In this folder structure, we have disabled the ability to delete files. So you see, I don't have the delete button. If I do a right click, I cannot do it. If I try to do it with the keyboard search shortcut, it says no, the file is still here. I cannot either drag the file out of the folder because the folder structure is protected. So all of these things that result in loss of information or files becoming invisible are automatically managed by AODocs. Sharing the document is automatically blocked. So you see I have you can ask the owner to change the sharing settings. I have to go through AODocs or I have to be an AODocs administrator to be able to do this sharing. When I'm in this folder, you see that I have this button on top of the search bar. And if I want to perform CD, search in folder, it will focus only on this folder structure. And then it gives me an option to expand the search to all of Google Drive if I want to search more. But by default, it's searching focus in folder. This feature is very important if you have validated documents, standard business templates, or approved documents that you put in a specific folder, if you want to make sure that people are using the right versions and the approved versions of documents. I have also the ability to find the docx file somewhere. I have to create it. So let me upload a Word document. If I have one, this one. Okay, so you see on this Word document, I have an additional button that lets me open it directly in Microsoft Word. So if I click on this this button, of course it's showing up on the wrong screen. So it's downloading. So Word is downloading the document directly from Google Drive. I can change the content, save it. If I save this document, you see it's uploading back to Google Drive. As long as the file is open on my computer, Google Drive has a lock on the file so that if somebody else tries to open the document at the same time, they will get a read-only copy and have a lock warning message. So not only do I get this direct integration between Drive and Word, but I get also the protection against concurrent edition. So you see, I have opened the file in Drive, from Drive in Word, modified it, saved it, closed it, as easily as I would have done this on a Google Doc. I never had to download it locally. I never had to upload it back. And everything works as expected. The modification date is set. the last modification owner is set, and my document contains the modification I made. So all of this integration happens also via AODocs, just like the searching folder, just like Trace. So AODocs basically provides within my Google Drive this protected area managed in terms of ownership, in terms of permission, in terms of folder structure, and gives me a better user experience. So that concludes the presentation. I see we have lots of questions, so I'm gonna switch to the Q&A part.
Yeah, it looks like we have a lot of really awesome questions that we definitely want to get to. I do want to go ahead and make the form available to everyone to enter in for our free giveaways for this session, including our Chromebook Pixel. So as Stefan is answering some of these questions, you can go ahead and fill out that form. It should just take a second or two, and then come on back and listen to some of these questions that Stefan's going to answer, because I know there's a lot of them, really good questions that we definitely want to get to. So Stefan, I pinned a few questions if you want to just go ahead and take a look at the Q&A app and see what you want to get to.
Yes, absolutely. So the most popular one is when an end user deletes a file out of a shared folder, it is deleted because it's inside of a folder that has been added to my drive. How can we prevent the end user from deleting files like that? It often causes problem, of course. So first, the file is not really deleted. That was the very first thing I showed you, if you remember, was this Alice and Bob folder. So the scenario we have here is Alice is deleting this file, Bob's other file. The file disappears from the folder. So the file is not really deleted, it's not lost, but the file is nowhere. Nowhere being in no folder. It's invisible to anybody. The only way you can retrieve this folder is by keyword search and then move it back to where it belongs. Unfortunately, there are not many ways to protect against that. The only real way you can prevent against that is what we do in this AODocs folder structure, is to make sure the folder itself is view only. So if I go into this AODocs folder, AODocs has set automatically the permission of the folder to view only, meaning that I cannot take this file and move it away, and I cannot delete it. The file remains in the folder because AODocs has prevented Alice to any user actually to move that. So, and that's really the only way you can protect against it in reality. Anything else, as soon as you can modify the folder, you can remove stuff from the folder, and the files are lost until somebody else moves it back. So setting the folder, not the file, the folder itself to view only is the only really reliable solution against this problem. And AODocs does that automatically for you, specifically to solve this scenario. All right, next question. How can we force changes to parent folders and make them propagate downward to subfolders? For example, the ownership. So some changes automatically propagate from parent to contains to children files. For example, when you add a permission to a folder, when you remove a permission from a folder, this modification will be applied to all children. But ownership and blocking reshares, those two things are not inherited. They're not propagated down. So if you change that, if you change the ownership of a folder, it will not change the ownership of the files. If you set a folder to only owner can change permissions, this setting will not propagate down. So again, that's something that we have to do automatically in AODocs. You can set globally the ownership on a folder at a folder level and propagate it down, or you can set globally the permission to reshare or not. But it's actually applied by AODocs using the Google Drive API, applying the setting one by one on each file. Google Drive does not do that automatically for you. So if you want to do it, you have to write a script. You have to create an application that will do it for you on the file-by-file basis. It's not doable directly in Google Drive. Next question. So AODocs manages data rights on Google Drive. We are wondering if it's also possible provide service for the actual migration of datasets. Yes, we do have a migration tool for physical file server to AODocs. And this migration tool automatically manages the bandwidth and make sure that we inject the files not too fast into Google Drive, and will replicate in AODocs the same folder structure and the same permissions that you had on your file server. So we do have this service, but we target specifically AODocs file server, not Drive only. Next question. In our school, users search a lot by creator. Can you still search on document created by Bob once the ownership has changed? I don't think so. You can search by owner in Google Drive. You can say owner : me or owner : Alice at demo.aodocs.com. But the notion of creator is lost when you do the ownership transfer. We have this notion in AODocs itself. So AODocs, the application, retains the information on who was owning the file before it was transferred to AODocs. So when you go through AODocs, we have a specific user interface where you can search by document creator. But in Google Drive, you can only search by owner. How many system accounts do you recommend for ownership of organizationally important documents? This is more a question of performance. So there are two reasons why you would want multiple accounts. One reason is segregation of access. The owner account, the account owning the documents, by construction can read all of the documents. So if somebody has the password of this account, they can log in as this account and view all of the documents, regardless of the permissions that have been set by AODocs. So if you have confidential files, or if you want to separate multiple corpus, let's imagine you have multiple companies sharing the same Google Apps domain, which happens from time to time. You may want to have one corporate account for each of those subdivisions, so that nobody has the password of all of the accounts. So first, that may be one reason you want to do that. Second reason why you may want to do that is performance. When you concentrate the ownership of files into a single account in Google Drive, you can create some performance issues if you have too many files and too many users accessing the files. So in that case, you may want to distribute the ownership over multiple accounts. The rule of thumb, it really depends on the number of users, on the activity, more than the number of files. But let's say, as an order of magnitude, a few tens of thousands of files, let's say 50,000 or so files per account is the order of magnitude that you want to consider. Unless the files are very frozen archives that nobody touches. In that case, you don't really have the problem. Next question. So I work in the marketing department of a global organization. We are struggling to provide global marketing assets created by Google Apps without having tied to a user account. So yeah, that's really a common scenario. The files that are globally shared with a large number of people, typically the whole of the company or a business unit, you don't want them to be owned by an individual user. You want to create a corporate account like we've seen that will own them. And more importantly, you want to share the whole folder structure to your users. You don't want to share those marketing assets one by one, because then people will use the wrong version of the presentation or the wrong version of the logo or whatever. You want them to have just a folder named marketing assets in their drive. They know they can go there, they can search within this folder, or they can explore the content of this folder without knowing beforehand what's in it, and then discover the list of assets. So make it owned by a system account and share the entire folder, not just the files. Next question: how stable and scalable is AODocs? We rely on Drive. AODocs relies on Drive API. It means it's limited by API limits. Well, we are based in the Google Drive API, but the Google Drive API is limited per account and is limited per domain. But AODocs is using the Google Drive API in your domain. So even if we have thousands of domains using AODocs, on each individual domain, let's say the number of customers we have does not impact the limit on one particular domain. So Google Drive is designed to have tens of millions of users, right? And this scalability applies to AODocs as well, because each of our file ultimately is owned by each individual domain. So the growth of our number of customers does not impact our performance on every single individual customers. We have today tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users. We have millions of files. We have customers who have hundreds of thousands of files and multiple terabytes of data. And we have customers that are very small, but they don't impact each other, right? The performance of each individual account, however, needs to be, when you have a large number of files, you need to consider having multiple storage accounts, like we discussed just before, so that you distribute the load over multiple accounts. But globally, the scalability of AODocs is the same as the scalability of Google Drive. And we are working very closely with Google Engineering. We are one of the biggest users of the Google Drive API, so we're very close to the Google Drive team, and we have special quotas on the Google Drive API for AODocs to make sure that we do not run into that kind of limitations. All right, next question is interesting on privacy. So it's more a legal aspect. Let me actually put back my camera because I'm not really showing the screen anymore. So is one able to maintain corporate compliance without content ownership, without infringing on employee privacy? I guess, I think the answer is yes. I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding, and that may depend country by country, but my understanding is that when you provide an account to your employees, because these accounts are in fact managed by your company, they're owned by your company, the data that employees put in this account belong to the company from a legal point of view. That's part of the general Google Apps terms of service that you provide, that your users have to accept when they get their account. So I don't think we are, and technically, let's say the other way to answer your question is your Google Apps administrators are able to change ownership of the files on any file of your domain the way they want without asking the employees. So you already have the possibility to read those documents. Adding AODocs to your domain does not give you more permissions to read, to inspect the content of the files of your document. So it doesn't change the legal and privacy aspects of your domain. It's just a tool that lets you manage the permission and transfer the ownership in a different way. But I think this question is covered by the Google Apps terms of service ultimately. Will Google supply general functions that mimic traditional file server without to look for third-party solutions? Partially, yes. I mean, you may have heard about some projects of group ownership, collective ownership of files in Google Drive that have been announced in the Google roadmap. I cannot comment too much on that because it's still more or less under NDAs, but Google is looking at the notion of collective ownership. I don't think this solves the solution of orphaned files or folder structure protection like the things we address in AODocs, but at least it solves the problem of accidental deletion of files when a user account is suppressed. With AODocs, we take a more global approach on protecting the folder structure, controlling the permissions. So it's not just the ownership that we address, it's the whole notion of considering the content as a whole and not as a collection of individual files. And that's where the file server metaphor is similar. When you move something in AODocs, it's like when you move something into a corporate file server, you have an administrator that controls the file server, you have an administrator that controls AODocs. So it's this notion of centralized control and not just the ownership. Does AODocs file controls work on mobile device? Yes, through the Google Drive mobile app. So all the files managed by AODocs are visible in your Google Drive. So they're also visible by through the Google Drive mobile app. So you can edit the files via the mobile app. If you add a file via the mobile app to an AODocs folder, the ownership will be transferred as well. The additional features like search in folder and integration with Office will not work on mobile, but the ownership and permission structure will apply on the Google Drive mobile app. All right, next question is about pricing. Do you have special price for educational? And so the question was, do you have special pricing for education and public sector? We do case-by-case pricing. We have lots of educational customers because in this sector you have obviously more ownership issues, like what do you do with files owned by students? So yeah, please contact us. We can always we have a case-by-case approach. Basically, we don't have a general rule that I can give you, but we do have we do make pricing for specific cases. Non-profit as well, by the way, if some of you are non-profit. Next question is, why allow the ability to share files with the domain if it's so hard to locate those files? I don't know. This is a feature of Google Drive. I think the label is misleading, indeed. But sometimes, I think from a performance point of view, it's more efficient to share with the domain than with a group containing every user, but that's more a technicality. Indeed, the problem is that it's hard to find if you don't have the link. So I have no good answer for that. I mean, that's something you should ask to Google. All right, how does this interact with Google Sync on my user's computer? So same answer as for mobile. The files that are managed by AODocs are visible in my drive, so they will be synchronized by Google Sync. However, we don't recommend to use Google Sync on shared folders because it tends to, if there is a synchronization issue, this synchronization issue instantaneously reflects on every other user. For example, Google Drive Sync from time to time creates duplicate folders or create duplicate files, and those duplicate files are immediately synchronized on every other computer. Then you have the bandwidth issue that lots of customers are concerned about, and accidental deletion is much easier with Drive Sync. You can remove an entire folder structure on your PC, thinking that you're just removing files from your PC, and in fact it's synchronized back to Google Drive, and the files disappear everywhere. So if you're using an AODocs folder structure and you do that on your PC, the files will not really be deleted on Google Drive because the files are owned by AODocs ultimately. But what you will get is that your PC will be desynchronized with Google Drive because on your local disk the files have disappeared. On Drive they're still here, and Drive Sync will not be able to resync, so that you end up with a local folder that is out of sync. So technically it works through the replication, but there are a certain number of issues with Drive Sync when used on shared folder that makes us not recommend that kind of setting. Is there a way to find how many orphan files are in the system? Not easily. You can create a script that does it. So the script would have, if you have a programmer that knows a little bit the Drive API, what you need to do is to get a full list of all the files that are owned by a certain user, and for each file you test if the file has a parent folder. If the file does not have a parent folder, then it means it's an orphan file, and you can count it and recover it. So you have to do a script to do that, but technically it's feasible, yes. Can you change a global setting in the admin control panel for all docs created within the domain so that they are set to only the owner can change permissions? As far as I know, it's not possible today. It may be somewhere on Google Roadmap. I haven't heard it, but as of today, it's not possible. I don't know if we have time to do all of those questions. That's great.
It seems like we have a lot.
I will reply to some of them offline on, I guess, on the Google Plus community page, right? We have that like last year.
Right, we had that last year, and also if Stefan, I don't know if you want to provide your email address if people have some specific questions.
Oh yes, of course, please do. Yeah.
So it is Stefan. stefan.donze@aodocs.com. Is that the correct?
It's just stefan@aodocs.com. Yes.
Stefan. So if you guys have any specific questions for Stefan related to the presentation or about AODocs specifically, please reach out to him, stefan@aodocs.com. He's obviously an expert on this topic, so he'd be happy to help out and answer any questions. And you can also ask them on the event page and in the Google Plus community, the GCon Google Plus community. So I think for now, we're running really close to running out of time. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Like I mentioned, if you haven't already, please take a second to fill out that form in the Showcase app so you can be eligible for some of our free giveaways. And I want to say, obviously, thank you to Stefan for putting together an awesome presentation. It was a great one once again. So thank you, Stefan.
Are we out of time, or?
Yeah, I think we're running out of time right now.
Okay, so I'll take the remaining questions on the community page written, or just email me. Yes, that works too.
Okay, great. Yeah, so with that, we do have another presentation that's actually starting in a couple minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting that set up. So if you guys hop on over to the next presentation that will be starting in about 5 minutes. That's the power of marketing with Google Apps presented by Google. So we'll see you guys then. And thanks again for stopping by.